very few RPGs venture into the vast landscape of outer space. I can only think of a handful of RPGs that have attempted this setting. Because of this, Star Ocean still stands out to this day, but the series stood out even more back when it first released on the Super Nintendo because there just wasn't that many space RPGs back then to begin with. The developers were greatly inspired by Gene Roddenberry's Star Trek and Roland Emmerich's Stargate, wearing those inspirations on their sleeves. While looking back in retrospect, elements of Star Ocean may have not aged the best, but it's still fun to go back and take a look at what was and still is a very ambitious title. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't have fun revisiting it for this retrospective. Star Ocean First Departure on the PSP actually served as my introduction to the series, and I've been an avid fan of the series ever since. So let's take a look back at the game that started not only my journey with this long-running franchise, but the entire long-running series as a whole. We will be taking a look at the re-release of the PSP remake Star Ocean First Departure, since it's the only version to get an official English release, and is the entry that is most easily able to be picked up and played thanks to its port to modern consoles. If you haven't done so already, consider giving the video a like, sharing if you can, and subscribing to the channel. And join me aboard the Calnus as we adventure to the planet Roke to uncover the origins of a mysterious disease turning the planet's citizens to stone in our Star Ocean retrospective. Real quick, before we get into development history, I've provided chapters making it easier to pick up and continue watching. Before we start, I also want to address the gameplay footage you are seeing during the development history section. This footage was recorded from the fan translation of the SNES version, giving everyone a glance of what the original looked like compared to the remake. Believe it or not, Star Ocean's developmental roots go all the way back to the very first game in Namco's long-running Tales franchise, Tales of Phantasia, developed by Wolf Team. Many of the key members of Wolf Team left due to too many restrictions from Namco at the time that hindered what they were able to add to the game. This breaking apart would result in the creation of Tri-Ace. Joe Asanuma would be in charge of directing, Yoshinori Yamagishi as producer, Yoshiharu Gatanda as programmer and writer, Ko Uchiyama was in charge of art direction and character design, Masaki Norimoto as designer, and composer Motoi Sakuraba would compose the music. Most of these names don't really pop up too much anymore when it comes to video game designing. Gatanda still works at Tri-Ace as a programmer and writer, while Sakuraba has gone on to make a legendary career for himself recording soundtracks for games such as Tales, Golden Sun, Dark Souls, and continues to work on the Star Ocean franchise to this day. Sakuraba may not be my favorite composer in video games, but he has crafted some amazing compositions over the years that I've really enjoyed. In my opinion, Star Ocean, or the Star Ocean series as a whole, is one of his best works. After developing Tales of Phantasia, many developers were disappointed with just how generic and limiting the character customization aspects were in Tales of Phantasia, with designer Masaki Norimoto stating, "After we made Tales of Phantasia for Namco, we thought the core items system and skill system had turned out kind of generic, and not distinct enough from other RPGs. We decided for our next game we were really going to go deep on the gameplay systems. We added both skills and special abilities, and greatly increased the number of items. We wanted to make a game where players could be as creative as he wanted, and play the game in any style he liked." The original Wolf Team also wasn't happy with how well the story turned out in Tales of Phantasia, feeling restricted in some areas of storytelling. Gatanda went on to say, "Because we wanted to explore characters more, we created the private action system. We chose space as the setting for Star Ocean because it allowed us to tell a bigger story than we could with Tales of Phantasia. It became clear the team wanted to go big or go home, to venture out into new horizons and pave the road for other businesses and developers entering the medium and expanding the RPG genre to set the staples for further developers to use. While I'm sure Tales of Phantasia is a fantastic game, I can't speak much about it. I haven't played it, and don't worry, we're going to fix that at some point. I can say for certainty though, many fans of RPGs really seem to enjoy Tales of Phantasia. I often think we just assumed back then video game development was the Wild West, a bunch of new people trying everything they could and throwing every idea they had at the wall. But that sadly is not the case. We can see even back then, publisher interference was something developers still had to contend with. It's also interesting to take a look at this design mechanic from back then, especially because of how casualized the market has become. It's a design philosophy today that just feels missing from every modern Western RPG. As more and more games blur the line of what an RPG is, this is a system I think many more games should implement and bring back those RPG roots the series started out in. Really take it back to those tabletop ideas that were originally ingrained within video game RPGs. Star Ocean back then was also a graphical anomaly, something the video game industry had quite never seen at that time. Looking back now, it may not be that big of a deal, but rendering the environments and the character sprites was absolutely insane. Seeing this on a Super Nintendo cartridge and how far they were able to push the Super Nintendo to its absolute limits was amazing. The cartridge alone packed a whopping 48 megabytes of data. Relatively small by today's standards, sure, but there were Nintendo 64 games with less megabytes of data than Star Ocean. Voices can also be heard in the game, which was a rarity back then. Though they've been muffled and compressed, it's a bit hard on the ears for the modern age, but back then this was a treat, something very rare to see indeed. Star Ocean, however, would never see an English release. With Enix pretty much giving up overseas localizations and no chance of Nintendo publishing it due to it being the end of the life cycle of the Super Nintendo, on top of that some of the questionable things and Nintendo of America's policies at the time, we never got it. However, a group of dedicated fans would fully translate the game and finally give Western audiences a chance to play it. A remake for the PSP was released back in 2007 called Star Ocean First Departure. This would be the first time many people would get a chance to play it. This same version would get a remaster on modern consoles called Star Ocean First Departure R. If you would like to contribute to development history, be sure to check out our Discord server down below, where you can drop interesting tidbits and articles to help us cover the games we're covering on the channel, as well as just meet new people and further join the community and make new friends. The space state is 346. Mankind has progressed technology enabling interstellar space travel. Through the journey, they've been able to colonize other planets and explore the vast ocean of space. This is the voyage of the starship Calnus, its newfound mission to save planet Rogue, to learn of a disease and find a cure, to travel through time and learn its mysterious origin. Upon starting a new game, we are treated to a cutscene of a starship watching an entire planet explode. Who did this attack and why are unknown at this time, but as we will soon learn, somebody wishes to start a war. Our story starts off on the remote planet of Rogue, a planet composed of feline-like humanoids known as Rogians. Rogue would be the equivalent to our medieval time period in terms of technology. Our story starts in a peaceful town of Kratos, as Roddick, Millie, and Dorn are on patrol duty. Kratos seems to be rather peaceful, so there isn't a lot of excitement happening. Roddick, Millie, and Dorn start their daily patrol, but it's not long after starting, bandits invade the town. The trio is successful in fending them off and returning peace back to the village. The next morning, the chief of the village gets a letter from the neighboring town of Kuhl. A mysterious disease plaguing the villagers of Kuhl has broken out. Millie's father Martoth, who is an adept symbologist and skilled healer, decides to head over there and see if there's anything he can do to help, and maybe find a cure for the disease, telling Millie to stay behind and not do anything irrational. 2 days pass and nothing is heard from Martoth. Roddick is feeling down, so Dorn and Millie decide to go cheer him up. Roddick is tired of nothing exciting happening. He just wants to venture out in the world and broaden his horizon, and it seems defeating the bandits in the town the other day has scratched that adventuring itch. Before the trio can make their daily patrol, however, a carrier pigeon makes its way to Kratos. Dorn picks up the letter and reads it. It's from Martoth. The disease in Cool is worse than he thought. Though not an airborne virus, any direct contact with someone who has the disease will cause you to contract it. What's worse is once affected, anyone who contracts the disease turns to stone 3 days after coming into contact. Millie, worried about her father, runs to Cool to check to see if he's alright. Roddick and Dorn follow her. We get a chance to explore the field here, seeing a spaceship off in the distance, and we'll learn where the spaceship came from later on. We can see the devastation, though, that this mysterious illness has left the citizens in. Each turn to stone. Examining them, Roddick will make a comment that they look oddly alive. Upon entering the house her father's in, he tells her not to touch him, as he fears Millie might contract the virus if she does. Millie is upset. She can't even be with her father, much less hold his hand while he passes away, greatly upsetting her. Roddick and Dorn, at the wish of Martoth, promise to take Millie back to Kratos. During the night, however, Millie decides she is going to go to the top of Mount Meteorix to retrieve a flower known for its healing properties. But before she can make her way out of the village, she is stopped by Dorn, who offers to help her. Dorn appears weak, yelling, "Don't touch me," as she tries to make sure he's okay. Dorn falling to his knees as Millie runs off to wake up Roddick. Once Roddick arrives, Dorn seems to be okay. The trio climbs up Mount Meteorix just past the village of Cool, but Dorn once again collapses. They figure Dorn has contracted the disease from Cool after he came into contact with the carrier pigeon Martoth sent to warn Kratos. With no other choice, they ascend the mountain to find the flower, hoping it will both cure Dorn and Martoth. Upon arriving at the summit, Roddick, Millie, and Dorn witness a beam of light descending from the heavens. A man and a woman appear from the light. They look like gods. Their clothing completely different. They introduce themselves as Roddick and Elia, telling them they are from another planet from above the sky, but cannot reveal much more information than that due to the underdeveloped Planet Preservation Pact, or from now on what we're going to call in this series retrospective, the UP3. This is a clear homage to the Prime Directive from Star Trek. Elia tells them they were sent to their planet to save them, as they became aware of this strange disease that has inflicted Rogue. One of the neighboring planets broke the UP3 and released it as a biological agent upon the planet Rogue to test it out. Elia tells them that there is no cure, but they are looking for one. Since they've probably told them more than they should have and not expecting life forms to be there, they offer them a choice to go back to their village and pretend this was nothing more than a dream, or join them and find a cure and leaving their planet behind forever. Millie, not wanting to leave her father behind, isn't too keen on going, but Dorn feels he doesn't have a choice. He doesn't want to stay behind and become a statue. Roddick convinces Millie to join them, as there's nothing they can really do, and saving their friends and family are probably the best thing that they can do in this moment. They beam up with Roddick and Elia on the spaceship, the Calnus. Upon arriving, Roddick, Millie, and Dorn are impressed by what they see on the ship, really asking if they are gods. Elia replies they are not, and they will one day be able to have this kind of technology to themselves. With the condition of Dorn worsening, they put him in sickbay inside of an incubator to monitor him. Roddick tells Elia to give Roddick and Millie a tour of the ship. After a quick tour, Roddick calls them back to the sickbay to update them on the situation. The doctor of the Calnus was able to isolate the cause of the disease, but unfortunately is unable to make a vaccine. Even with their advanced medicine, this is a disease they have no way of curing. However, if they can get their hands on the first person exposed to the disease, he might be able to do something and create a vaccine. Dorn wishes to die in his own bed, but Roddick assures him that they are going to find a cure. Still, he wishes in any case that they can't. He just wants to die in his own bed. They transport him back to Rogue and beam him down into his bed, placing him in it. He gives Millie his sister's music box before turning to stone. Roddick decides it's time to go back to the Terran Alliance and update them on the situation. Before they head off though, they are intercepted by a starship from the Lozarian fleet. Lozaria is the planet responsible for creating the biological weapon in the first place, as well as destroying the planet East, which we saw blown up at the beginning of the game, or at least we thought. Turns out, Lazaria reveals they didn't have much of a choice. It was a third party with advanced technology that forced them to take these actions. Ronix asked them to hand over the DNA in compliance from the first known person to have the disease, but they don't have it. The last known person to have the disease was a Rokian 300 years ago, somebody known as ASMODEUS. Roddick instantly recognizes the name as a figure behind the demonic wars. With no way to save Dorn and no vaccination, there isn't much they can do. The Alliance has also blocked off Roke since the discovery of the disease to incubate it. So Roddick and Millie can't even go back to their hometown. Elia and Roddick and Millie all seem defeated. Isn't there a way that they can find a cure? Well, perhaps. Ronix, however, does have an idea. The Terran Alliance recently discovered a planet named Styx where a mysterious ancient device known as a Stargate lies. However, access to Styx is prohibited because they aren't fully aware of just how to make it work. Ronix is determined to find a cure and the ARCHFIEND ASMODEUS. Ronix chances court-martial to find a cure as he's willing to do whatever it takes. They undock the Calnus and fly off towards the planet Styx. How Captain Kirk of him. Making their way to the planet Styx, Ronix tells them they must leave their weapons and transmitters behind to not throw off the time gate. Ronix pleads out to the Guardians of Time, begging them to listen to him. He asks the Guardians to send them back in time to the planet Roke of 300 years ago. The Guardians, allowing access, open the portal and they're able to step in. Millie and Ronix step through, but Elia trips on a stone, giving way. Roddick catches her, but this delays them getting sucked into the portal and causes them to get separated from Millie and Ronix. It looks like Elia and Roddick are going to have to find them first. Roddick and Elia end up in the town of Krot. First matter of business, we need to find Elia some clothes since the futuristic clothes make her stick out like a sore thumb. After finding her a change of clothes, we can finally make our way to the next town of Hod. Talking to the shopkeeper Badam, he needs someone to deliver goods from Portmouth back to Hod, but crossing Mount Meteorix has proved a problem. We take the job and are joined by a swordsman named Sias as he gives us a documentation that will let us get past the guards of Portmouth. Making our way across Mount Meteorix, we make our way to Portmouth, showing the permit we just got from Badam he gave us, and once we acquire the item, we can finally make our way back to Badam to deliver it. But before we do that, let's talk a little bit about gameplay. With 3 party members in our party and a few levels under our belt, I think it's about time. Combat in Star Ocean First Departure is very action heavy. It's simple but to the point. Basic attacks are executed using the confirm button to hit your enemies. A basic attack, no matter the amount of MP you have, will always be able to be used. However, each character comes with a wide variety of arts they can learn as levels are gained. Arts serve as a special skill, doing more damage than a regular attack. The drawback is they consume MP. In the menu, you'll be able to select your party leader. This is the character you're going to have direct control over in battle. Other members of the party will be controlled by AI. You can swap your controlled character inside and outside of battle as you wish, as well as change the tactics up of your AI party members, how each character will perform in battle, and how you want them to act. If you leave them to give it their all, this will let them attack freely using arts and basic attacks as they wish. You can set your healers to prioritize healing above all else, ensuring your party is always safe from status effects and their HP is as high as it can be. If you want to save your arts or spells for bosses, you can do so by selecting Conserve MP. Lastly, we need to talk about private actions. We've actually already had a chance to see a couple of these in action with Elia. During visits to town, an option may pop up called Private Actions. By pressing the corresponding buttons, the party will split off, giving us control of Roddick. Our party members are split throughout town. Approaching them with Roddick and talking to them will activate an exchange of dialogue with them. Sometimes you'll get an interaction where it will happen between more than one character. These are usually ways to kind of build up the character's personality, let you kind of see them outside of the story and learn a little bit more about them. Though not too in-depth in Star Ocean, this was one of those ideas that developers were talking about wanting to expand the characters. They're usually small, short little interactions that don't really add a whole lot to the character, but it was really cool and innovative to see something like this put into such an early RPG, and it's going to be fun to see how these mechanics are expanded upon throughout the series. The use of characters in battle and completing private actions will also affect their affection. Doing so will net you a special ending with that character if their affection with Roddick is high enough. Upon returning from Portmouth, we can finally give the object to Badam he asked us to retrieve him. After, Cius will join our party, figuring he can find some sort of treasure on the way. We'll need to head back to Portmouth first though and see if there's any information we can gather on what to do next. We learn we'll need to get to the Kingdom of Astral, but in order to do so, we first need to take a detour to the pirates' hideout and stop their tyranny of the sea. After defeating them, we can make our way to the back and unlock a prisoner, a cat folk lady named Perici. Though we don't know her name yet at this point. We arrive back at Portmouth and Perici leaves, but drops her ocarina, so we should probably pick that up for later. Afterwards, we can finally make our way to the Astrian continent. Here, we pick up some new gear, visit the Colosseum of Toltori. To get to Astral City, we'll need to pass through Astral Cave. Upon arriving, the party retires for the night. During the night, a doppelganger attacks the captain of Astral's guard, Lord Leas, severely wounding him. Roddick and party hunt down the imposter while Fia, a member of the Astral Knights, and Cius visit him to make sure he is okay. We learn Lord Leas is Cius's father, but his relationship with him is rocky at best. Afterwards, we are given a choice of whether or not we want to go to another town or visit the Purgatorium, an ancient ruin left behind by an ancient race, and a secret item called the Eye of Truth is hidden there, which is said to show people the truth or show them what they desire. In order to enter, we'll need to find the secret entrance. If we follow the mountain back, we can find a path blocked by a rock. While searching for a way, a winged man appears asking us to help him move the stone. He wishes to get inside of the Purgatorium. He is a featherfolk race, another species here on the planet Rogue. His name is Joshua. He tells us he's looking for his sister, whom he was separated at childhood by a man named the Crimson Shield, a legendary swordman that kidnapped his sister and slaughtered his whole family and left him for dead. After making their way to the Purgatorium, the party runs into three sisters, the Sisters of Fate perhaps? Anyways, they tell Joshua his sister isn't here and the Eye of Truth isn't what they think it is. They are, however, able to help them locate Millie and Ronix, who are in the neighboring continent of Selvland. They do tell them not to come back to the Purgatorium though. Guess we know our next destination, and Cius tells us we can get over there by taking a ship from Trop. Upon entering Trop, we witness a collision of a giant object hitting Rogue. Roddick believes this object to be the Celestial ship. He explains it crashed and nobody knows where it came from. It is decided we are going to make our way back to Krot to prove Roddick's suspicion. We can also see this object at the beginning of the game if you detour to it. This was that spaceship that I had made a comment about earlier on in the video. Once there, we can finally make our way back to Trop and on to the next continent, docking at Ekdart. We see Millie right off the bat, and if we chase her, we can go to the inn. We learn Ronix and a woman named Mavel have gone on to the next town over to find a man who goes by the name of the Crimson Shield. This, of course, piques Joshua's interest, and both Joshua and Cius seem to know who he is. That's interesting. Making our way to Ionis, we can finally see Ronix and Mavel, but the Crimson Shield has no clue what they're talking about. It seems he has a relapse in memory. How convenient. After Mavel tries to confront him, he eventually runs off after almost trying to kill her. Mavel and Ronix join the party afterwards and finally giving us a full party, well, almost a full party, to play around with. Ronix has some extremely good spells he has learned throughout, making his symbology extremely useful in battle. Millie also seems to have picked up some extremely useful healing spells along the way. I went with Roddick, Elia, Millie, and Ronix, but you can change your party however you want to and play around with their skills and abilities. With only one character shy of a full party, I think it's due time we talk about what is perhaps the most ambitious idea of this game. Remember how I said during development history the team behind Tales of Fantasia had creative differences when it came to how they wanted to represent character customization within the game? This is why. Star Ocean's character progression honestly has yet to be outdone in my opinion. With each of your characters leveling up, they will gain SP. These points are specifically used to learn new skills. In order to do so, you will need to visit the skill shop and buy the skills you can learn. The more you progress through the game, the more of these will become available. Skills are broken down into categories such as knowledge, sense, and combat, usually accompanied by a number, and you'll pay a one-time fee to acquire these skills. Once you've acquired them, you'll make your way to the menu, go to skills, and select learn skills. Here, you'll be able to start learning skills. Pro tip, take out the time to max out determination first. This will take time, but it will ensure all other skills cost less SP, allowing you to learn them much faster. At first glance, these skills seem pretty useless. For instance, what the hell is music knowledge going to do to benefit you? Well, combine that with performance and max that out. With a character, they will be able to compose music and perform. In order to do this, you'll need to buy a feathered pen, a musical instrument. Let's take Roddick for example, since I maxed out his music knowledge first. I'll need to buy a harmonica, then use a feathered pen to compose music for the harmonica. This is based purely on RNG as to whether or not the composition will be successful. I can learn a song called Lonely Blues. Playing this song using the perform option will reduce the amount of random encounters as long as the music plays, or at least it would. But there was also this point where I ran into a problem. It seems using Lonely Blues increasing encounter rates despite saying it lowers them. The theory and concept is cool, but this was a glitch that plagued the PSP version, and it was also ported over to the remaster and never officially fixed. Still a cool concept in theory though. Something else I did find earlier was to max out Elias' cooking skills. This allowed me to buy food and ensure I could make long treks through dungeons early without having to return to towns to restore HP or buy healing items. Sometimes they give you perks in combat, such as increasing defense or a more successful chance of hitting an enemy with a critical hit. You can even teach someone familiar, which summons a bird to your location to retrieve items for you and bring them back. This makes traversing dungeons much easier and ensures you always have the items you need to get through, eliminating needless backtracking to heal and get items. NPCs do give you hints to some of the abilities you can learn. For instance, the ability Familiar, there's this dude who tells you he trained a pigeon to fetch items for him. Though the game doesn't explicitly come out and say you can learn a skill with this, it does make you stop and think, maybe Animal Lover might be a skill that I can learn to use. Star Ocean has an abundance of these skills you can use, from cooking to crafting to item duplication right down to pickpocketing every villager. This process is highly ambitious and honestly gives each character a bit of uniqueness and usefulness to progress, and sometimes some characters are just better at a specific ability than others. For instance, Millie has a better chance, make her just better at performing music. It honestly is an in-depth system and is going to take time and efforts to fully understand and get the hang of. But once you do, it is so exciting and so enthralling. It's going to be a system that's not for everybody, but those who sit down and take the time to figure it out will not only be rewarded through gameplay, but it will also make the game easier or harder depending on how you want to make your challenge. Once the skill is learned, like music knowledge, you'll be able to go to the special tab and use it. And there's even some abilities where more than one character is going to be able to participate, such as blacksmithing. This will allow you to start crafting your own armor out of various different metals you can get across the world. Since I never toyed around with any of the concepts in the Star Ocean games my first playthrough, it's an endeavor that is definitely worthwhile investing in. And I look forward through my many playthroughs of the rest of the Star Ocean games to see how this combat system evolves and taking a look at it as we review each game. Honestly, this is probably my favorite part of Star Ocean. This is what I really enjoyed most during this playthrough. The amount of customization that goes into how you can build your characters, giving them their own unique edge. Finding out what characters have more of an adaptability for certain things than others is just an amazing concept. It's really a mechanic you just don't see too many video games use, and I would love to see other developers take some inspiration from Star Ocean when building these. Because as I said at the beginning of the video, it really does take it back to this tabletop kind of style of RPGs and leaves you in control of your characters about how you want to progress them and what abilities you want to give them. We need to make our way to ASMODEUS and gain an audience with the King of On. Before I did that though, I did make a pit stop at Mount Ekdart to learn about a friend that Joshua had. Visiting the mountain during this brief side quest, Joshua and the old man talk, asking him if he still hunts in the mountain. This man saved Joshua's life when he was thrown off the cliff as a child, and it is the only reason he is still alive today. The old man admits he doesn't hunt much anymore due to monsters infesting the area. I agreed to kill them off, getting a reward from the old man. I finally made my way to Vaughn to meet the king. Ronix tells the guards he wishes to get an audience with the king as he wishes to defeat ASMODEUS. Since not many have the ambitions to fight the Demon King himself, it's not hard to get an audience. The king says the only way to open a portal to the demon world is from the inside. But he does tell us long ago there was a hero who managed to find a way into the demon world. Upon the brink of death, he escaped, setting up a way to get back with the Eye of Truth in hand. But in order to obtain it, we need an emblem from each of the 4 kingdoms. The Mua were an ancient civilization that was said to have appeared from the ground as fully grown adults. They appeared to be as gods. Well, we're going to do what Star Ocean does best and backtrack to the previous castle. Astral is pretty easy. You just return to where the king is with a little bit of backtracking and you're done. Boom. It's Portsmouth that proves to be a big challenge. The problem with this is the dungeon inside the castle can be quite a difficulty spike if you're not prepared. The best advice I can give is go to the mines in Mount Meteorix and continuously run back and forth after each battle until it becomes much easier to take care of the enemies in the abandoned mine. And then make your way through it. You'll also want to make sure you have the customization ability learned with Roddick. By customizing Orichalcum, we can make the second strongest sword for Roddick, the Dueling Blade, just by adding metal to the luxurious sword you would otherwise lose after leaving this dungeon. Once I got the emblem there, I went to Sylvaland. The King of Sylvaland tells us that there is an island nearby which the Demon King seems to come from. This is our destination. This is the demon world we've been looking for. With all ships available to all kingdoms now, we can finally clean up any side quests we haven't gotten a chance to do. Since I've already done all the side quests, I make my way to the King of On to find out our next steps in the process of defeating ASMODEUS. The king tells us the Eye of Truth will lead us to the path towards the demon world, so we'll need to go back to the Purgatorium and make our way into the depths to retrieve the Eye of Truth. Making our way through the Purgatorium once more, we see 3 spirits once again, upset we came back after telling us not to, but then they soon recognize us as the successors of Mua. They let us into the inner sanctum. Ronix comments this doesn't look like something developed by an underdeveloped planet, and at first glance is very technologically advanced. The 3 sisters left behind by a race of humans appear on Rogue thanks to a portal, the citizens of the lost continent of Mu. Yes, this is hinting at the lost continent we know as Lemuria or Mu. We'll talk a little bit about this later. Acquiring the Eye of Truth, it's time we can finally make our way to the abandoned island and fight ASMODEUS. Upon entering the demon world, we are instantly thrown into a fight with the Crimson Shield. He reveals he was possessed. He seems to have been possessed, so the deeds and the people he slaughtered were not of his doing. It's too late for him though, as he has been around long enough. He tells us he has 2 swords capable of defeating ASMODEUS in the Kingdom of Astral. However, ASMODEUS is already aware of their existence and plans to claim them for himself. He has sent one of his henchmen to Astral to retrieve them. Out of options, the party uses the Eye of Truth and returns to Astral to destroy the invading enemy. Once victory is ensured, we can talk to Captain Leas of the Astral Knights in order to acquire these mythical weapons, a sword without a blade called a Force Saber. Let's just call it what it is. It's a freaking lightsaber. Going back into the demon world, we can finally make our trek through it. It doesn't appear to look like hell or any place where demons would exist, but gives off this otherworldly vibe, like a dimension between dimensions. Deep inside the demon world, we find another tower of advanced technology, hinting at ASMODEUS perhaps being more alien than actual demon. After making our way through this advanced structure, we finally encounter ASMODEUS, the Demon King. Once Asmodeus is defeated, some people in weird armor show up and extract a sample from Asmodeus. It seems like they planned this for a long time, the party complying to stay where they are and wait for others to leave. Since they only wanted the sample and the party poses no real threat, they saw no reason to kill them or take them hostage as they were just after the sample. Finally able to obtain a sample, we can finally make our way back to the present and save Rogue. The doctor aboard the Calnus was able to concoct a cure, saving Dorn and other citizens of Rogue by mass-producing a cure. It's time to say goodbye to Ronix and Elia though, as we'll probably never see them again. Meanwhile on Earth, we learned from the Admiral the Lizonians were forced to issue the attack of the pathogen on Rogue, and the war with Earth was to keep them distracted so Farget could get back to Earth and reclaim their world. The evil dictator G.A. Revorse orchestrated the entire thing to distract Earth and make it easier for them to invade. Farget is known for its harsh environment, and it has become increasingly harder and harder for humans to live on the planet. The citizens of Farget were also part of the lost continent of Mu. When the portal opened up, some of the citizens ended up going to Rogue, while some of the others ended up going to Farget. The Muha of Farget strived to find a way to make it easier for them to avoid the harsh habitat of Farget, by trying to construct a superhuman that could survive the harsh elements. Asmodeus was the first, though deemed a success, he was unhappy with living on Farget. Asmodeus used the space-time laboratory, that building we saw in the demon world, and used it to go to another planet, ending up in the demon world where he declared himself ruler over the monsters, and in the demon world, eventually coming across a portal that led to Rogue. It was here he began his plot to take over the planet of Rogue, because it was green. The Farget military was also deployed 300 years ago to find Asmodeus and collect a sample of his DNA in order to take it back so they could once again create another superhuman back in Farget. Farget was successful in creating a superhuman to survive the harsh climate, but one of them, a man named G.A. Revorse, killed the other superhumans and declared himself ruler of Farget. Elia and Ronix gather the party using the time gate and bring them to the present. Rounding up Roddick and Millie, they make their way to the desolate wasteland of Farget. Upon arrival, the Farget army was waiting for them and ambushed the party as they landed. With no other options, they comply. But the soldiers are thrown off guard by a smoke grenade thrown by the resistance group. However, Millie, Cius, and Perici were kidnapped and taken to prison. The resistance group has also suffered losses as well, as some of their own have been arrested. They come up with the plan to distract the guards so Roddick and the party can make their way into the prison's back door. Eventually, they're able to make their way through the prison, finally reunite with their allies, and make their way to Revorse Tower for the final showdown.
Oh, I didn't expect the Alliance's dogs to make it this far.
G.A. Revorse, you're going to stop hurting people starting right now.
I am merely trying to fulfill the ardent wish of every man, woman, and child on Farget. The Mua who were snatched away from Earth have spent millennia hoping, praying for a way to get back home.
So, that warrants an invasion? If a home is all you want, there has to be a better way.
The people of Earth have incessantly squandered the resources Mother Nature gave to them. Don't you think it's time they received a taste of their own medicine? Just like the Mua did when they were thrown off their homeland.
I don't think that's for you to decide.
So you want it all to be in some god's hands? If so, I will become that god. I've already laid hands on the creator role here. If being the creator of all things makes you a god, then all that remains is for me to take the throne for myself.
We're not gonna stand here and allow that.
I fight in order to protect my own life. If you won't even let me do that, then why was I created? I see no point in further discussion. Only the strong survive. The first law of nature, wouldn't you agree? Now, allow me to show you just how insignificant you are. Unbridled storms, drag them into your pummeling depths!
Avenging Fist! Healing!
Move a little faster!
Fist!
Immortal Tempest! My body. What's going on?
Watch out! This is tough.
Accept your fate and kneel down for your divine purging.
Fist!
Yes!
All he wanted was to survive in the end, didn't he? All the power in the world can't help a person overcome a fragile spirit, I suppose.
Maybe that's the secret. Maybe you need a weak body to be strong in spirit.
Perhaps. When I look at the Rokians, I can't help but hold out some hope for the human race, too.
They may not have the technology, but they have the heart. We could learn a lot from them.
After the fight, the Calnus makes its way to Styx, so the rest of the party can go back in time and say their goodbyes. Ronix and Elia tell Millie, Dorn, and Roddick goodbye, for real this time, and make their way back to the Calnus for many more adventures to come. As the scene flashes back 300 years ago, the party members from that time make their way to Mount Meteorix to plant a giant tree. The scene shifts back 300 years later where Millie and Roddick see a tree, figuring it must have been planted by their friends, as it just magically appeared. That concludes the story of Star Ocean. Before we wrap up the gameplay though, there is one last scene we do need to quickly brush up on. And it is a scene between Ronix and Elia, where Ronix proposes to Elia, vowing to spend his life with her. This scene is important because this scene is actually canonical throughout the game, as the main character Claude from Star Ocean: The Second Story is the son of Elia and Ronix. The Star Ocean franchise is well known for its replayability and post-game content. Depending on the decisions you made, your party very well could look completely different from mine. For instance, you can find the body of Joshua's sister, and by breaking the crystal, this will result in Mavel leaving the party for good, and his sister Iris joining the party instead. I wanted to keep this retrospective exclusive to my playthrough, so you'll have to let us know how each character and character interactions changes down below. Star Ocean also offers up post-game optional dungeons where some of the hardest challenges and bosses lie in the game, the Cave of the Seven Stars. I didn't include this in the retrospective because I didn't want to complete it for this playthrough, as I wanted to focus mainly on the story and the characters as a whole. But I did dive in a bit, and even the basic enemies were able to best my level 112 characters. Couple this with a lot of equipment and abilities, you'll have a solid foundation for a game that can last you for quite a while. If you're new to my retrospective, I like to dive deep into what's inspired our video game stories, or what inspirations the developers were looking at when taking a look at the story, and kind of how those events can kind of tie back into real world and what lessons we can learn from the story. There's not a whole lot in Star Ocean to play around with, as the story is just very simplistic and fun, but that doesn't mean that there is some, and one of the biggest ones that come up is the lost continent of Mu. The lost continent of Mu was believed to be one giant continent, more commonly known today as Lemuria. 12,000 years ago, much like Atlantis was lost due to a worldwide flood, it is believed by people who say it existed, so too was the continent of Mu taken over by this giant flood. It is believed what was once left of Mu was the remnants of the Polynesian Islands, Australia, and New Zealand. Though its existence is more of just a theory, I do think it's possible it existed at some point. If you took a look into the alternative theories regarding archaeological finds and the origins of humanity, you've probably heard of Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson. There's a running theory these two have quite heavily talked about, where a meteor from the Taurid meteor stream hit and destroyed the North American ice wall, which would be modern-day Canada, and caused a worldwide flood about 12,000 years ago in the event called the Younger Dryas. Just found this kind of interesting, considering that Star Ocean was said the meteor hit the continent of Mu right around 12,000 years ago. It was around 12,000 years ago the global flood rampaged through the Earth. Mu is believed to be one of the many locations of the Garden of Eden, but the existence of Mu is hotly debated, and that's what I like about the Dryas theory. Zealandia is a possible location considering it's a microcontinent, though it's believed to be broken off from Antarctica at some point. Shintoism and Japanese culture have no doubt played a crucial role in forming these ideas, as even an ever-expanding Japan with their big buildings and cities taking away and eating up much of their land and wilderness. Revorse makes the comment humans don't deserve Earth because they destroyed it, yet he too seems to be using the same resources by making robots and benefiting from technology of the modern world. Revorse can honestly be seen as an overstepping government figure or an overstepping billionaire who just wants everything. He is more than willing to point the finger and blame others and take away luxury for them, but is unwilling to admit he does the same thing. The allegory to the story isn't too hard to find. How often do you hear about politicians, rich CEOs, billionaires educating us, demanding we need to cut back on fossil fuels to save the planet, yet they fly on vacation, use their private jets, or coast the sea in their yachts, all on the backs of tax dollars. Instead of finding ways to create cleaner, reusable energy that could improve the environment, it's the same people making these rules that refuse. This is because it's not about making the world a cleaner place. It's never been about that. They want complete control, and if we can't own property, assets for our own food, land to grow and raise our own food, supply our energy, they own everything, control everything, and dictate how everyone lives. There is no push for cleaner, more affordable energy. We have the resources. Why haven't we done it? It's always about power and achieving power. It's funny, really. We elect politicians thinking that they will do the right thing, but they only use the machine to benefit themselves. Revorse would have just likely contributed to the same problems Earth was already having and experiencing, and then just dictating how all the citizens of Earth actually lived. Since Star Ocean was clearly inspired by the works of Star Trek, it's really no surprise a virus would have appeared with no cure and way to fix, but I think Star Ocean's plot goes even way deeper than that. Stone sickness was a disease created by G.A. Revorse in order to kill and taint the planet of Rogue. Though we will learn more about its origins in a later game, a cure has yet to be found. Well, at least until a party found it in this game. Stone illness was a biological weapon dropped on Rogue which caused immense damage to the population. Had Ronix and Elia not shown up, Rogue would have likely been devastated, as everyone on the planet would have eventually been turned to stone. ASMODEUS was the original carrier and likely planned to use it to spread across Rogue back 300 years ago. However, it probably came from the remains of ASMODEUS' body, and more than likely was also genetically modified. We do know that bioweapons exist in our world. Companies and governments are looking into what causes diseases and how to replicate them. Biological weapons are a huge thing. We constantly hear about them. We know the militaries across the world have them and that they can drop those on us at any point, which is the really freaky thing. But if it could be released on that population, it could kill, weaken, and reduce the population in numbers, making it far more easier for people to invade and get rid of the enemies, especially if the people developing the biological weapon had a cure for it. These are scary things to think about, especially when you realize governments are not always transparent with their citizens, and even if they were, they're likely to keep things from them or under wraps as to not worry or scare the public. There almost always seems to be a talk about bringing back to life or cloning specific species and bringing them back into the real world. But what diseases could they have with them? What could we be creating by doing that? These are all questions that we should be asking. That's kind of what they were ending up doing by creating a superhuman, especially by going back and getting ASMODEUS' DNA. They weren't quite 100% sure what some of the other stuff he could have contracted going to a different planet would have been. That was risky business. Maybe we shouldn't be extracting DNA from animals that are over millions of years old and finding a way to bring them back to the modern world. But it is one of two stark reminders Star Ocean gives us about playing God. They oftentimes say the path to hell is paved with good intentions, and while FARGET wanted to make their race live longer without resources and find a way to adapt and grow, they paid the price. Both ASMODEUS and Revorse were superhumans that went rogue and turned on their creators, making life a living hell for a lot of people. Had FARGET not been toying with eugenics and gene manipulation, it certainly wouldn't have happened, but this is a real thing that we do see happen. A certain World War II dictator tried this in trying to breed what he considered to be the superior race. And we even toyed with the idea for a long time, which really frightens me. Eugenics is the practice of planned breeding, effectively taking desirable traits and creating offspring in hopes they would inherit them. There's multiple different ways that you could go about doing this, especially with artificial insemination becoming a thing. Talks about incubator tubes necessarily coming up. This just causes a way for people to get those desirable traits that they want. Give you an example of what traits someone might be taking a look at. Say, for instance, there's a likelihood two physical fit people with high metabolism rates were to have an offspring. That child would likely be lean and have a high metabolism as well. Thus, those two desirable traits from those parents would be something they take a look at in eugenics when trying to create the ultimate child. Eugenics is effectively a way to rid the world of undesirables. We've seen attempts at cloning or growing limbs on other organisms, and even more recently lab-grown meat, which I guarantee you will be void of any nutritional value. Revorse is also likely another Star Trek reference and a nod to the Wrath of Khan. I think it's important to, again, not play with Mother Nature and let Mother Nature create as intended, but that's just me. All in all, I had a blast playing Star Ocean First Departure. It was nice to revisit the entry that I first played that hooked me into its universe all those years ago. The original Star Ocean would become a cult hit amongst the emulation community and really was ahead of its time. The story actually had quite a bit more lore and depth to cover than I actually even thought it would, and while the story isn't necessarily deep, philosophical, or profound, it's still a fun story, and fun stories sometimes are just really fun to cover. We still have 6 entries in this long-running series retrospective to cover as of recording this video, so we've got quite a journey ahead of us. But with all the planets left to explore in the vast Star Ocean, each with their own story to tell, I look forward to continuing this journey. We are going to take a break from Star Ocean, and while I'm not sure what my next few games will be, we will be returning to Star Ocean either in December or January, since I plan to pick up the second story R for our next retrospective, which will require 2 playthroughs to get through. And if you've played it, you know why. I'd like to be able to grow and continue to improve my content, which means being able to upgrade equipment. If you would like to assist in that endeavor, again, there are links down below to my Patreon, or you can become a member right here on YouTube to help support. Doing so will net you 2 days early access to my retrospectives as well as other perks and benefits. Until next time, stay safe out there, stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out. If you've made it this far in the video, I just want to say thank you so much for sticking around. If you haven't done so already, consider subscribing and giving that bell a notification so you do not miss a video when it goes live. If you want to be like my Patreons over here, you're more than welcome to click over there and help support the channel. Completely optional, but every little bit does help, and I am very appreciative of it. And I'm appreciative of you for just sticking around and watching the video as well. You can also check out my latest reviews and my other videos here as the latest video that has been posted, and check out my other reviews here, or check out our other podcasts. But most importantly, guys, stay safe out there and stay happy, be happy, game happy. Spoons is checking out.